Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hey everyone. Okay, I just want to apologize in advance. We had a recording issue and Andrew's audio is perfect. My audio is pretty messed up and I channeled my best audio technical skills to clean it up as best as possible. But I just wanted to apologize in advance that this is not the best audio. Please listen to all of our other episodes for much better quality audio. But enjoy the episode.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
Good.
I'm excited for today's topic. Before we jump in, just want to remind people where you're at. Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. Each week, I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. Today, we've got co-host Andrew, and we're going to talk about the one metric that you likely don't track, but should be tracking. What's it called, Andrew?
So I called it the lifetime gross savings rate. And I started writing, I did a blog post in 2020 talking about it, and I hadn't really seen people talking about it, but I've come to find out that there were some people talking about it, and I like calling it the lifetime gross savings rate, but other people in the personal finance community call it a lifetime wealth ratio is the most commonly called name for this metric. But what's interesting about it is that it's not talked about very much. Like if you Google this concept, it's not talked about in a lot of the forums. It's not talked about, and I love it. I think it's a great metric, but not super common.
Yeah, Andrew, I agree with you. It's not something I had ever really heard of. I think you mentioned it and I was like, oh, it's a cool metric. And I just hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, I think we talked about it like maybe a year. Actually, when we first starting, we put this as a topic.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd heard of it before I said it to you.
Yeah, I don't think I had.
Which, you're pretty well plugged into the personal finance space, right? You did 300 episodes of Friends on Fire, right?
Yeah, somewhat.
And for it not to come up, I think that's for you not to have heard of it. It's a good indicator that it's not talked about very often.
We'll talk about why we think this is an interesting metric, but I think in general, it's just kind of fun to track different things and understand where you're at. And so why don't you actually define how you calculate the lifetime gross savings rate, or what's the other thing you called it? The lifetime wealth ratio?
Lifetime wealth ratio. Yeah. So it's a pretty simple concept. Lifetime gross savings rate is simply taking your net worth and dividing it by your lifetime gross earnings. And you might be, net worth is an easy one, right? Most people are tracking that.
And if you're not, you should be.
You should be. Yep.
It's a slightly more difficult one to track. It takes a little bit more work than making this calculation. But I track my net worth monthly. How often do you track yours, Andrew? I think a little less often.
I probably do it a couple times a year.
Even if you do it once a year, that's great. But it's an important metric to track, and we're big fans of tracking it.
Yeah.
And I think it's tied to what gets measured, gets improved, gets better. Yep. But keep going.
So in terms of lifetime gross earnings, I'd been tracking in a spreadsheet kind of what my annual earnings were, but then I realized that there's a really simple way to figure out what your lifetime gross earnings are, and it's on your Social Security statement.
The government's been tracking it for you all this time. You don't have to do the work.
Right. And so it's super easy. I always recommend everyone sign up for the Social Security Administration, SSA.gov, and you get your login and you make sure you get your statement every single year to make sure that your earnings are being recorded by the government. But also it's a super easy way to calculate exactly what your lifetime earnings are, because they provide you a very simple sheet with every single year and your earnings. So I just make sure I match that up onto a spreadsheet that I have for tracking all of this.
Yes, that's pretty cool. Literally list every single year and it'll show you back to the very first year that you made any money that was recorded by the government.
It's earned income, I believe is the correct term.
That the government had access to, right? If you made
Yeah.
money under the table or had some cash job when you were a kid, like that's not tracked. But some of the original statements I got went all the way back to 1993, which was the first year I had some sort of income. Oddly, that year I had $37. Then I had like nothing for 2 years. And then in 1996, when I was 16, I made $2,467. Just a, I don't know, fun fact.
Yeah.
That was one of my first high school jobs.
I love looking at mine, and just it's great to see the history. And my first year was actually in 1988. When I was 11 years old, I was a extra in a movie, and I got paid $50 for being an extra in a movie.
Wow.
And so that's the first line on my Social Security statement.
What was the next one after that?
The next one after that was 93, when I made $1,000 and $1,096.
All right, that was the year I made $37.
Okay, I think that was lifeguarding. I'm pretty sure lifeguarding was my first real job where I got a paycheck.
Yeah, that's cool. It's kind of fun to like go back and just see. Like I can see this one summer, the summer of 1999, because I see it in my Social Security statement. I had a sales job selling Yellow Page. That dates me, ages me. Yellow Page ads in university Yellow Page books. And I
That's
was
old school.
really good at it. And I made almost $9,000 that summer. That was a lot. That was a lot for like, you pull in $1,000 being a lifeguard over the summer.
Yeah,
I was like going door to door doing sales and like
you were making bank.
I made it was a tough job. I learned a lot. I didn't ever want to do that again, but I made good money.
Yep.
Anyways, so the idea is you can get that whole history. And like, I just downloaded a new statement today and in preparation for this episode. And I noticed it kind of truncated like my first 5 to 10 years into like one lump sum. That'll still give you the data you need to do this calculation, but you actually can get it by year. I think you just have to you have to download the Excel view when you I downloaded the PDF view. If you download the Excel view, it'll dump it all into.
Download the Excel view and it'll give you every single row.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a super cool data though. And for me, it was just kind of fun. I was just telling Andrew before this call, in 2023, it currently shows 0. So back to, the last time I had 0 was in 1995, like almost 20 years ago. And that's because I will actually have some income for 2023, but it'll be rental property income. The government doesn't know about that yet because I haven't done my taxes and it hasn't been reported. But eventually that'll get updated to reflect that. So the point is you can go to the Social Security website, which we'll put a link in the show notes.
One quick call out on that is there's a cap on the earnings that go towards Social Security, but with Medicare earnings, there is no cap. And so if you're making over the cap, then you can just reference the Medicare earnings line on the statement as well.
It gives you 2 columns, basically. One is how much of your earnings were taxed for Social Security, and then it shows you the full amount that was taxed to Medicare, basically. There's also some cool data in that statement, and even on the website, there's some cool data that's forecasting how much you'll get in Social Security at different ages, which I wouldn't read too much into because they're doing their best to forecast a system that is potentially running out of money. But it's interesting. It's cool to kind of forecast and imagine how much your payments might be.
An episode for another day.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so why is this? Let's get into why is this a cool measurement? Why is this something that is worth it for people to go in and figure out what their lifetime gross savings rate is?
I equate it to your savings rate, whether you look at it on like a monthly or a yearly basis, right? People look at that all the time, and it shows you, it essentially measures your efficiency, right? Of all the money, if you just take a month, everybody kind of understands the monthly and the yearly thing. Okay, how much did I make this year? How much did I spend? How much did I save? Well, you just expand that to your entire life, and how much money have I made? How much have I been able to save, invest, and those investments to grow? And how does that compare to what I've actually earned?
Yeah.
And so it's a great metric to measure overall efficiency of how strong or weak your savings rate is. If you're still in debt, the number can be below zero. So I think it's a great metric to be able to track across, if you're a middle income earner or a low income earner, but you have a really high savings rate, this can be a really strong metric for you. If you're a high income earner but you don't save that much, it can be a low number, right? So it kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, it normalizes whether you're, on a teacher salary or on a banker. I don't know, that's an old school reference, but a banker salary. One of the things I really like about it is I always struggled with people who would measure their savings rate, because I was always like, there's just too many things like coming in and out of my finances. I was like, that was a very hard and daunting metric for me to measure. And I'd always see people sharing it online. And I was like, I had no idea what my savings rate is. I know it's high, but it was higher later in life and, lower earlier in life. And so two things. One, it's very daunting because I just didn't feel like I had clean enough data coming in and out of where different things were coming in. And I didn't track stuff for such a long time. I didn't have data from the 90s, the 2000s, early 2000s. And so what's cool about it is you don't need any of your own historical records, right? You know your net worth now. And if you don't know it, you can take literally 30 minutes to track your net worth, which we're not going to go into net worth in detail, but your net worth is essentially all of your assets minus all of your debts. And that's your net worth. It might be positive, it might be negative. But that, if you don't have good back data on that, you don't need it. You just need today's. It's looking back at your whole history, and you can get all that history from the Social Security government website. And then you can look at your, a snapshot in time of today's net worth, and you got a really good sense of kind of how you've been so far, what you've done and where you want to go from here. And again, I love that it kind of normalizes all that phrase of it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you save.
Right.
Well, this will give you a sense of how well you've been saving and making the money that you earned work for you, because the whole idea is, of course, you're spending money, you need money to live. But if you're investing it well, you've got good compound interest, and that's going to, hopefully catch up.
Yep. Just another nuance in terms of calculating and tracking it. If you're a two-person household and you think about your net worth with two people, then you also include the salaries of both people. So for Crystal and I, we calculate it based off of our net worth, which is a combined number, and then the incomes that we both have had throughout our life.
Yeah, cool. You can do it individually, and then you can do a combined version, and be very easy to do both too. Well, I guess if you're tracking your net worth together, if you have combined finances, it'd be pretty hard to do separately because you don't know, you don't track your assets separately. So
yeah,
great point that I added absolutely nothing to. Well done, Andrew.
Well, one thing to talk about is that Charlie Munger, who unfortunately just passed away, he was for people who don't know, he was Warren Buffett's partner in his investment. I forget what his exact title was of Berkshire Hathaway, but essentially Warren's right-hand man in terms of investment strategies. And he actually talked about this concept a little bit. He did an interview a few years ago.
He was the vice chairman, by the way, for anyone who's really concerned.
Thank you. Many people say he was the brains behind a lot of the investments, but him and Warren are in a class alone, right?
Yeah.
In terms of investors. And he talked about this concept of when his investments overtook his lifetime savings or his lifetime earnings, and how long it took him to get there. And he said it took him 13 years to get there. And you think about that, and that's extremely impressive, right?
13 years from what was the starting point? Him being out of college or something?
Yeah, from when he first started making money, right? And so his investment returns were so strong that his net worth was able to eclipse his lifetime earnings in just 13 years. And
it's pretty cool.
So there's that concept as well that people will talk about a little bit.
Well, and back to the efficient word, that's super efficient, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. So maybe the next topic, just talking a little bit about the different phases of this, and they line up along the lines of other personal finance topics, where if you're just starting out and maybe you've got a bunch of college loans, or you've got some credit card debt, and your net worth is is actually below zero, that you're still in debt, this ratio is going to be a negative number. But as you start to save and spend less than you make, and start to build wealth, then you'll start to have this number to be a positive number, and the number will be, it can be from zero to, it can be negative below zero, or it can be over one. But if you're starting out, I think people 0 to 20% is kind of that bucket where you're just kind of starting out, and then you.
Did you make up these buckets, or did you get them somewhere?
These are all I made these up.
Okay, I like them. I just want to know.
Yeah. This is what I posted on the blog were these buckets. I mean, these were probably a little aggressive for, when you post your stats below, right, of them, they're probably a little bit aggressive. But then, when you move into the next bucket, you're in that, 20 to 60, 70% range. You're making really smart financial decisions. You're now saving for your future. Your net worth is growing. It's not growing as fast a rate typically as your earnings, but you're really making solid progress. And then when you get over that 70% range, you're really starting to excel at this, and the beauty of compound interest starts to take over, right? And so, I think we've talked about it on I think Liz talked about it on our episode we did at the end of the year, where, her investments had grown really strong. I mean, everyone's investments last year grew really well, right? Yeah. And so for many people last year, their investments probably outpaced some of their earnings because the market returned such strong values. And it's like when you start getting up to that level and you start seeing your net worth grow more than your earnings, that becomes super powerful. And like that's kind of the ultimate FI dream, right? Is you don't need to work anymore because your investments are able to cover your lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a super cool feeling to. I mean, I'm there personally, but it's also just a super cool feeling to kind of look back and see how things have grown and the exponential nature of that, right? Like the compound interest doing its quote magic of when you're seeing compound interest on smaller amounts of money, when you're starting to build things up, you don't feel it as much. And then you just start to see that like snowball build and build and build and not like the debt snowball. And actually on the opposite base, that's what happens when you're in debt and you're paying these high interest rates. You want to get the inverse of that, which is you're not in debt, you're actually investing. And instead of paying 15, 20% in interest, you're earning 15 to 20% or 10% on average. But it's a really cool feeling just to see that compound interest doing its magic.
Yep. And then the next and final bucket is when it crosses that 100% threshold, where it's just like what Charlie talked about, right? Is your investments now have eclipsed your lifetime earnings, and you're in a super strong financial position. You've essentially reached FI, right? That your investments will surely be able to cover your lifestyle if you were able to get to that one level.
Yeah. So Andrew, I want to share some things myself just to be like transparent about where I'm at here that I think are interesting. And I just want to preface this with saying, I want to share this because in my experience, I found that people find it like interesting just to kind of hear what other people are doing and where they're at and stuff. And I've been as transparent as I can be, or I'm, willing to be on this podcast and about many financial things and aspects of our lives. But I want to share it because because I think it's interesting, and I'm not sharing this to like brag or anything. I'm sharing it to show what's possible, I guess. And look, I've said many, many times, I was actually just having a whole exchange with someone on Instagram about this, that I was in a higher income. I happened to work in a job where I made a very good salary, and it, it progressed over the years very nicely. And I feel very fortunate to have, I worked very hard. I, was also in the right place at the right time and in a growing career field and things like that. I think Andrew, you were in a similar position. But I say all that just to preface it as in like, I'm sharing it because I hope it's interesting to people. And one of the things that I think is most interesting to people, and it's back to the like compound interest piece that we were talking about, is I didn't track my net worth for a long time. I don't really, I could go back and find some like old documents where I did track it, but it was like bits and pieces. It wasn't complete and consistent. And so I don't have great net worth data going really far back. So all I'm going to do is go back to like 2019, because that's where I've got some data. So in 2019, my gross savings rates, and again, I'm doing all my earnings on the Social Security site up until 2019. My gross savings rate was 56%. So of all the money I made throughout my lifetime, I was able to retain about 56% of it, right? Which is kind of interesting. And I'm just doing me right now because I don't have great data for Greg in front of me. So that's one person. And what I think is interesting about that, and I'll kind of circle back around to how it's grown and the power of compound interest. But what I think is interesting about that is, to me, it's just so fascinating to like take a moment and step back and look at all the money you've earned over your lifetime, whether you're 5-10 years into your career. And if you're 5 years into your career, you probably have 10 years worth of income because you might have had jobs in college and high school and other things. But a lot of people, based on our average listener age and demographic data, like a lot of people are 20 years into their career, right? So there's some really fascinating data and like volume to look at in terms of that data from the Social Security office. And to see as like a big amount, how much you've earned, to just see that amount, whether it's small or large, depending on kind of what you do for a living, and then to think about like how you've spent that money over the last 20 years is interesting. To just step back and like reflect on it and think like, do I feel good about those choices? Do I feel, am I where I want to be financially? Like, I just think it's an interesting like inflection point and sort of almost like milestone to like stop and reflect upon. How do you feel about the last 10 years, 20 years, however long you've got to look back on? And when you see that big dollar of, I mean, big as in, even if it's not large, but the added up of 20 years of income, when you see that dollar amount, how do you feel about where all that money went? Do you remember it? Do you have great memories of like, oh yeah, I've done all the things I wanted to do for the last 20 years, right? Or are you like, I don't know where all that went, right? And I just think it's this interesting point to stop and think and have some reflections upon your earnings over your lifetime and what you've done with that and where you're kind of at with it now. So I just encourage people to do that because again, when we talk about this kind of, one metric that a lot of people don't track, I think that's why this can be a really interesting metric.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I think the scale of stepping back and looking at your aggregate savings over your lifetime, and for people who are later in their, you're looking at 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I think it's a great reflection on how I've made all this money. What do I have to show for it? Now, this is a gross number. So taxes obviously are in this number, right? So so everyone's gonna be paying taxes. So it is a gross number, and so you got to take some right off the top for taxes. But one thing I like about this as well, when just talking about taxes, is it takes into account your tax efficiency. So for example, DCP plays right into this, with deferred compensation plans, and your overall tax efficiency is reflected in these numbers. And if you're able to take advantage of a deferred compensation plan and defer those taxes, it's definitely going to help this number out.
Yeah, totally, Andrew. And that is actually a good point related to me sharing how this number has grown for me. So in 2019, I was at about 56%. In 2020, I shot up to 70%. And that's incredible. That was tax optimization. That was a year we got really aggressive on. I put like 75% of my salary into my DCP, and our salaries were like increasing, and we were just like spending less and less, right? We were avoiding lifestyle inflation. We were seeing the power of larger numbers that the compound interest was compounding upon. Right. And so that is nice. So then taking it up until now, real time for me, I'm now at 85%, and I haven't worked in the last year and a half. Like I'm sharing this not to brag. I'm sharing this as that is the power of spending less than you make, investing the difference. and then letting it, and then doing some tax optimization things also, like maxing out your 401k and things like that, where you get, maxing out an HSA, the things that have these kind of outsized tax benefits that seem small in the moment of like, oh, I'm saving 10% on taxes here, but it adds up over time. And it's just kind of neat to like look back and see. And so the other thing I would counsel people, and kind of tied to like those buckets that you just went through, Andrew, don't beat yourself up. I say this about net worth, like don't beat yourself up if your net worth is negative. Pat yourself on the back for the fact that you are now tracking net worth. You know where you stand, and you're focused on improving that number and moving in a positive direction.
What gets measured gets improved.
Yeah. And same thing with this metric, right? If you measure this, there's nothing to feel good or bad about, I think, in your number. It's the first time you've ever looked at this number. Look at it, decide how you feel about it. And like I said, like look back at how much money you've earned over your lifetime, right? If you were a teacher for 20 years, and I'm just going to throw out an average number, which I have no idea if it's accurate, like $50,000 a year, that's $1 million.
Yeah, I have all those numbers in the spreadsheet in front of me.
There you go. Crystal's a teacher. But like, can a teacher make $50,000, right?
Yeah, her max year was 54,000.
It's reasonable to say then that like a teacher over 20 years could earn $1 million, right? And so again, that's a point of saying like, look at how do you feel good about where that $1 million has gone and how you put it to work for you and how much of it you saved and all that. And so again, I think the encouragement is just figure out where you are today and then commit to doing the right things to move in a positive direction. Right. And there's related to that, there's this cool stat that I think will make many people feel better about where they're at. I don't know, maybe not. So I shouldn't even say that, but it's from the Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report of 2021. They estimate that over 50% of adults have a net worth under $10,000. And that's why I say, like, I think that will make many people feel better about if they have a negative net worth, say, look, you're not alone. Half of the US has a net worth under $10,000, which also means you often can't handle like emergencies and a job loss and like something unexpected. 11% of adults have a net worth between $10,000 and $100,000. 9% of adults have a net worth between $100,000 and $1 million. And 1% of adults have a net worth over $1 million. And I just think that's an interesting stat that is related to the idea of wanting to grow your savings rate, also known as in this, what we're looking at, your lifetime gross savings rate. Right, of like how much you've saved out of what you've earned and grown through investments and other things. I think the point is like most people don't save enough money. And I think we want to encourage you to get into that 1 to 11%, of the stats we just shared, where your net worth is between, $10,000 and up, and moving to the mentality of spending less than you make, avoiding lifestyle inflation.
And investing the difference.
Yeah, and investing the difference. Like it's a simple formula, and it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. And I fully realize that because I've had different phases of my life where I've lived that versus just thought that or no. Yeah, there's times I didn't even know that. There's times that I knew it but wasn't doing it, and then there's times that I was doing it aggressively. And I think it's the more you know, and if you're listening to a podcast like this, you're already on the right track. And just listen to more podcasts, read more books, surround yourself with positive influences. And I think it can get you motivated and excited to move things in the right direction.
Agreed.
So Andrew, one of the things I like about this too is I always think about, I'm not a big fan of people like bragging about their wealth, which is why I'm always like hesitant to make it like saying even what my lifetime gross savings rate is or something, because I don't want it to come across as like braggy or anything like that. So I don't love when people are like bragging about what they'd bought or like all these different things. Like Greg and I were just talking about that on last week's episode, because just saying like, look, saving money is sexy. My point is I would rather someone brag about their savings rate than like all the money they spend. Right. And that's the sort of mindset shift I want to get to, is like, I wish we lived in a world where it was cool to be like, rolling into the parking deck at work and like whatever old car you're coming in on and being like, but hey, my savings rate, flipping good.
I mean, Maggie, I think we should do bumper stickers for Inside Out Money savings rates, and we just, you put your savings rate on your bumper sticker.
We'll put like leave it blank where you fill it in.
Leave it blank. Yeah. You can Sharpie in your previous year's savings rate.
We'll sell like 4 different ones. Like my savings rate is 0 to 30%. My savings rate is 70 to 100%. My savings rate is 100%. check out my savings rate. Yeah, that'd be funny. We'll get some t-shirts that say, ask me about my savings rate. Ask me about my lifetime gross savings rate. That should be on the like dating profiles, you know? Forget like a picture of you with like your motorcycle or car or like the craziest photos that people post. No judgment, but I think I just threw some. I would love to see a photo where, you know, a guy's like holding up a board that's like, my lifetime gross savings rate is 32%. I'd be like, that guy looks hot.
Yep.
Okay. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting and like thought provoking and, you know, a little homework assignment for you to go work on.
Yeah, everyone's got to go and calculate it.
Go calculate it. Shoot us a text. Let us know like what you found out about yours, or if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. On that note, we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for listening. We always appreciate you spending some time with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, we really love it. If you want to give us a written review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, when you leave that written review, you can let us know what your lifetime gross savings rate is. We really appreciate it.
We always encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Awesome. And yeah, when you hit us up on Instagram, like let us know what your gross savings rate is. It'd be fun to hear them, but text it to us. Or seriously, if you guys have any questions, I try to always respond to all questions. So if you don't get an answer back, like ping us again, because it probably just got lost in the shuffle somewhere. But yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Maggie.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.